Hello and welcome to Self-Publishing with Ally, the podcast that brings you all the advice, news, and inspiration an indie author needs today. And today, you're listening to our creative self-publishing stream. It's brought to you by Orna Ross's Go Creative program, helping authors harness the power of creative flow in writing and publishing. And now, here's Orna Ross and Joanna Penn with today's episode.
Welcome to the Self-Publishing with Ally podcast with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi, Orna.
Hi, Joanna. Hello, everyone.
Yes, hello. We are back. And today we're going to talk a bit about the Author Nation conference, which we have just got back from Las Vegas. So we're going to talk a bit about that. Also, some hard choices and some new directions. So as ever, we talk about what's going on in our own writing and author business lives. And we try and keep it real over here. Lots to start with. But Orna, because I've been to Las Vegas to Author Nation last year and 20 books before that. This was your first one. So why don't you start by telling us about your thoughts on Author Nation?
Yeah, it was Ally's first time at Author Nation. My first time in Vegas. Sorry, Vegas, I don't love you. But Author Nation was fantastic. Ally was there as a sponsor, and we had a booth to meet our members and tell prospective members about what we do and how we do it. And we also had, speaking session. We had a lovely meet up with Ally members. And yeah, all in all, I think, it's shaping up to be, I know that Joe and Sue's the husband and wife team who are behind Author Nation, that they have a long-term plan, which is really great to see. For the next few years, and the way they're shaping things up, I think it is already a really important pillar of the indie author community, and I think it'll only continue to get better and better, really. So for Ally, it was a very good event, and it's just so great to see everybody. It was my first trip back to the US since COVID as well.
Oh, really? Wow.
Is that right? Actually, no, I tell a lie. I did go to New Orleans to a conference that's no longer running now, but yeah, it was my first time back to West Coast USA since COVID. And yeah, it's great when the community gets together. I love those conversations that you have, when you just bump into somebody and something gets sparked, or somebody gives you permission to do something that you didn't even know you wanted to do, or, all that kind of thing. How was it for you?
Yeah, I think like what you're saying there, one of the things about conferences in general is that if you keep going, I mean, it can be very hard the first time you go to a conference as a new author or a new anything. But that's kind of why you have to go again, either to the same conference or the same genre conference or something, because the relationships that you were talking about there, I mean, the bumping into people in the hallway, it happened to me too with people I didn't even know were there, and mostly I had a lot of one-on-one conversations that I had organized in advance. So I knew I was meeting people, and then there were people like, oh my goodness, haven't seen you. Like there was one person I hadn't seen in like 6 or 7 years. And so sort of the catching up with people you have built relationships with over time. I mean, I still remember you and I meeting for the first time after meeting on Twitter, back in 2010 or something like that. And then we bumped into each other literally at the London Library, and our friendship kind of went from there. So sometimes you just really have to be humans in physical physical proximity. And I know I do want to acknowledge that it's very difficult for some people. I understand that with budget, with time, money, caring, potential. But if you can, I do think the investment of time and energy to go to something is a way to make author friends, to find help on the journey, because so often our friends and our family, people who love us in our real life, they just don't understand. Like they haven't got a clue. They think we're weird. They don't understand the trials of being a writer. So you can find those people at these conferences. And then this can turn into business opportunities as well, with people that you meet in a sort of authentic way. And the other thing is meeting some of the vendors. So there is a vendor day at Author Nation, and a lot of these vendors we do see at other conferences as well. So one of the significant vendors was BookFunnel, and who I've been with since the beginning of their company, and Damon, who I met at a conference, like a decade ago when he decided to build BookFunnel to help people deliver ebooks. When you get to know the vendors, also you can ask them questions. And if you talk to somebody at one of those vendors, so the guys at Drafted Digital, for example, or Pro Writing Aid were there, and my editor was there, Kristen, you can talk in a more personal way about your specific issue as an author. So all of that to say, it was, a great conference. I tolerate Vegas. And I have a lot of things like a humidifier in my room and all of that. And I also went a few days earlier. I went to Antelope Canyon, which was something I wanted to do for like decades. So I think that's another tip, is try and tie in some life things you might want to do at the same time. But yes, for the time, it was a great conference, and it was really good to connect. But I did want to ask you, because of course Ally runs the SelfPubCon sort of online conference. How do you think the online conferences sort of contrast, I guess, with a big or in-person conference?
Yeah, it was really interesting because SelfPubCon was 18th, 19th of October, and then just a few weeks later, Author Nation. So it was a real, the contrast was more obvious. I never had them right up against each other like that before. And I think, there are advantages and disadvantages to both. I would say that overall, nothing beats the human connection that you were talking about, and just meeting somebody physically is a different experience. But of course, as you were saying, it's so expensive to get there, and the great thing about online is you can do it in your pajamas. You've got the maximum sort of convenience. And of course, SelfPubCon is free for a number of days, and you can focus in on what you want to focus on. And I think you've got replays you can revisit. It's a completely different experience. Of course, I should say that Author Nation also is available as a digital package. All the sessions were filmed and will be released. So there is the opportunity to get a digital version of Author Nation as well. So I think, online conferences have lots of pros and cons, and it's the opposite way around. The cons for the online is kind of the pro for the human one, and vice versa. So some combination of both is ideal, I think, just in terms of maximizing the learning. But you need to know what you want to do. And that was something that really very much at Author Nation, because there were just so many sessions and lots of overlapping sessions. So going to a conference, not trying to do everything, which I think is the typical sort of, if you haven't been before, the typical sort of thing is you want to go in there and you just want to hoover up as much information as you can. But when you do that, I think you tend to get less usable things. And it's better to possibly approach the conference, but looking in advance what you want to attend, who do you want to see, having some goals for yourself, and and realizing that it is like everything in this business. One conference isn't going to do it. It's a bit of a mix and match sort of thing.
Yeah, I think one of the other things I was reflecting I did a big podcast episode on my show, The Creative Pen, about it. And one of the things I was mentioning is what are the big mistakes of brand new authors, and often it's getting ahead of yourself. So, one of the things is that there were a lot of vendors and, as you said, sort of sessions on things like selling direct, which we've talked about, but I consider it to be an advanced topic and something that you need things in place before you do things like selling direct. And yet there were kind of authors who were getting excited about doing that who hadn't even finished a book yet. And people get excited about how they're going to publish a book before finishing a first draft. So kind of, I think that was the thing with the sessions. Like you can do sessions on, I mean, even things like Facebook meta marketing, for example. If you haven't finished a book yet, by the time you have published a book and might be even interested in marketing, that will have moved on. So it's like just whether it's online or it is in person, it's sort of look at where you are in a more realistic sense. Where am I in the journey? And then think about it that way. And the journey of craft is often a different journey. No, it definitely is a different journey to business. So someone might be have come out of traditional publishing with a 20-year craft background and yet be a beginner in terms of business. So I think that kind of trying to understand where you are really is, and then finding information around that is important. I did also wanted to ask you on that also in terms of vendors, because there were a lot of vendors at Author Nation and there are a lot of companies online that we all get pitched by who sponsor things. And I was going to ask you, how do authors decide who to work with? And maybe talk a bit about the Watchdog service and how people figure that out.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up there when you were talking about education, how important it is to understand who's giving the education and what the context is. So it's not just about assuming that every session at a conference, or whether that's an online conference or an in-person conference, that every session is equally, in terms of for what you need at that moment in time. So very often at conferences, there are sort of pay to play situations where, as part of the package of sponsoring the conference or being a vendor at the conference, you get a speaking slot. And so new authors can go along to those and, assume that because it's in a conference that everything that's being said is completely true and valid. And it may well be, or it might not be. And so, yeah, it can be hard to work that out. And there's just a huge network of companies now. They are expanding. As we speak, more will have opened, all vying for our money and our attention, and it can be really quite overwhelming. And there were a lot at Author Nation, right? It was the vendor, the vendor area was really big, with lots of different companies that I had never heard of, and it was interesting going around and seeing what people are trying to do and thinking about doing. So yeah, since Ally began, there has been a Watchdog desk, and there are a few people who work on the Watchdog desk all the time, and it does a variety of different things. But one of the things it does is it lays down a code of standards, and companies that are willing to sort of say yes, that code of standards is fair and reasonable and we abide by it, can become partner members of Ally. And so they are then vetted by the Watchdog desk under various categories of value and service and so on. And that seemed to us a very important thing to do. And back when we started, it was very much about vanity presses. Remember them?
Yeah. They're still around.
It's still
just, we
there.
don't really call them that.
They're 100% there, but you just don't tend to hear about them in the community the way we did back then. And then, the ways in which services have expanded across the 7 processes of publishing, there are just gazillions. And now with AI-powered services where people can, very cheaply do things that would have needed a big labour investment before, they're springing up all over the place. So yeah, allianceindependentauthors.org/watchdog will kind of tell you what the Watchdog service does. There are ways in which you can evaluate a service, and we have a guidebook choosing the best self-publishing services, and that's available at selfpublishingstore.com. So, and in there's sort of checklists and things that you need to look at. Obviously, you need to look at things primarily about rights and ownership. That's the first thing to look at. And then after that, it's about value for money and whether this service actually gives you what you actually need and want at this moment in time.
Yeah, and that's, as we were saying, like, don't go to sessions when you're not at that point, and don't buy products and services when you're not at that point. It's just,
Exactly.
I mean, we all do this stuff in the enthusiasm, but especially in this era of subscriptions, right? It's like $5 for this here a month and $10 a month for this, and then you realize, like, my goodness, you can end up subscribing to all these things. And let's say you're putting out one book, like you're an author and you're putting out one book, and that might be it for another year or two. A lot of this stuff, you don't want to be paying subscription fees every month for things. So I always say to people, if you can, don't put down like a whole year for these subscription things. You often get a reduced rate for a subscription if you go in for a whole year. But I say to people, just do a month at a time, and then next month you'll get reminded. And that's when I often will, if I'm not using it, I'll cancel it, or I'll go to the lowest tier, for example. So even I use 11 Labs. So for AI audio, I've got a voice clone, but I don't need it right now. So I've gone down to their lowest tier, and then I go back up to the tier when I need the service. Do you do stuff like that?
Totally, absolutely. Otherwise, the business becomes untenable, I think. And you need different things at different times, so it's no insult to anybody that you're kind of dropping and need to move on for a while or maybe permanently. And webinars as well, and education generally, conferences. I mean, I know people who, purchase conferences and not gone to one single session. So budgeting, not just your money, but also your time and attention, and focusing in on your needs at the moment. I think, especially at the beginning, you can be very, very enthusiastic and just want to hoover it all up. And it's very understandable, that enthusiasm. But step by step tends to work better.
Yeah. So one of the sessions, the opening keynote, in fact, a guy called Drew Davies, was interesting to me in a number of ways. Now, one, because I'm a speaker and you are too, I have a sort of a way I look at speakers, and I'm evaluating the way they speak, let alone their content. And this guy, Drew Davies, it was a masterclass in keynote speaking. It was excellent. And if people are interested in being a speaker, getting professional training again in that is important. But he was just so good with what he did. But he also his content was also awesome. Some people are just sort of performance over content, but his content was good too. And one of the things he was talking about was that constraints breed creativity. And that actually fits into what we're saying. What we're saying is you have to constrain yourself. You can't go to every session. You can't take action on every point. And he sort of had this framework around how to constrain yourself. I won't go into it all, but one of the things was that if you want to achieve something, you have to eliminate other things. And I know you resonated with this. So one of the things that he said, so this is Drew Davies for people listening, he talked about eliminating the unnecessary. What can you stop doing in order to pursue the new thing? And if you start something new, you have to kill two things. Kill the easy one, then kill the hard one. So kill the easy one, then kill the hard one. So in our notes, you resonated to this. So tell us why this resonated with you.
Yeah, very much so. So, we were talking last time that we spoke about my big shift and my need to dump, delegate, kind of move things around and just do things differently. And I've been shaping up my own author business on the one side, and how we do things at Ally on the other, in order to kind of go to the next step and go to the next level. So when I saw that in your big post about Author Nation, which, by the way, if anybody is interested in the whole Author Nation thing and what was there and whether you want to go next year, I really recommend reading that, and we'll include the link in the show notes. But yeah, kill the easy one, then kill the hard one. Just jumped out at me from your transcript, because I realized that's kind of the way it had gone for me. So I was just thinking a little bit more about that, about, what are easy kills and what are hard kills. And so for me, an easy kill is sort of something that's low impact, it's low emotion, it's probably a should that you've been carrying over for a while that you should drop, and not let it kind of run you anymore. Possibly something that did work that doesn't work now, but the thing is, you're not hugely connected to it anymore, if you ever were, or it's not having a huge impact on the business. But the hard kills then are high emotion, and the return is still low. And I think, if you're killing things off, if you've got a high return, that's something else entirely. That's not what we're talking about here. But things you're attached to, and often that might be just your identity, this is how I do things. This is the kind of writer I am. This is the kind of person I am. Or it could be an ego thing or an artistic reason. But whatever reason it has been part of what you do and how you do it, it no longer is justifying the cost, either in terms of financial cost or the cost in time. So for me, examples of the easy kills was, we discussed this last time, leaving social media. So it had stopped working for me at sort of every level creatively. And it wasn't like it was yielding me a huge amount of book sales. So it was a relatively easy kill for me. And what was happening in social media generally, across all sorts of things, ethically particularly, was just killed it off. I no longer wanted to be in that space. So that was an example of my easy kill. But a hard kill for me was a series that I've been carrying around, and you know this better than anybody, the Go Creative series, which I tried to resuscitate again.
I was going to say, you killed it before and then it came back.
Killed it before, back it came like a multi-headed hydra monster. I really tried to make it work because, I think it is something to do with the identity ego thing rather than it actually fitting in or being necessary or in any way. But it was still really hard for me to completely kill it off this time. Excuse me. So, but I did. And that's just an example. So why did I have to? I mean, I still find myself saying to myself, oh, maybe, when everything else is tick, 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 I'll go back to it. But I think it's really important to kill it. One of the most important things about doing the hard kill is the signal it sends to yourself. It tells you that you're serious about the new phase, because if you want to move and change and grow and expand and go to the next level, whatever that is in your mind, then, the reason you haven't done that already is that something is getting in the way, and you do need to let something go to say to yourself, I'm clearing the space. Where I'm going is more important than what I have been doing. And there's a whole deep energy thing there that goes way beyond time. Yes, sure, it's about time, but the hard kills usually kind of leave you feeling that you've cleared out a lot of mental clutter. And certainly that's the way I felt afterwards. And I think that's probably part of it.
Yeah, and I mean, this also kind of fits into what I've been doing. So since we did this podcast last time, I've started on my master's in death, religion and culture at the University of Winchester. And it is a full-time 1-year taught master's. And at the moment I'm doing 3 it's all quite heavy. I mean, really, it's pretty heavy material.
Go on, tell us.
So I'm doing one on sort of an introduction to studying death, and I'm doing right now I'm writing an essay. So as many people will know, the academic side of things, there's a lot of reading, there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of writing. There's also no AI allowed, so it's a very intense thing. And so one is I'm writing an essay on natural burial, and it's all kind of critical critical theory around this type of thing and theories around death. And so that's really interesting. Another paper I'm doing, I've actually got a book by me right now. Those of you who love this kind of thing, the book is called The Devil's Atlas, which is a guide to heaven, hell, and the afterworld. And I'm writing an essay on a particular sort of early medieval fresco and where the ideas of hell came from in Christian sort of ideology. So that's another one. And then the third one, which I think is something I'm going to turn into something at some point, is the ethics of being a fiction writer and being inspired to write a story based on human body parts. So my it's a crime thriller. So there's a body found in the Hunterian Museum, which is an anatomy museum, a medical anatomy museum in the Royal College of Surgeons in London. And I visited it in 2012, and you're surrounded by body parts in jars. I think everyone can imagine what an anatomy museum looks like. And I didn't even have a second thought about writing a novel based on the way I felt in that place. And so this essay, I'm really challenging the ethical side, because museum ethics have changed a lot since 2012 in terms of consent around and power around where these bodies came from, around different aspects of being able-bodied or disabled, or what are considered freaks in the Victorian period, that kind of body part. There are all kinds of really interesting ethics around that. So that's just 3 topics I'm doing at the moment. And I'm reading so many books. I mean, I'm just reading a lot every day, and then writing a lot and thinking a lot. And so coming back to what we were saying in terms of giving up the hard things, because I am doing so much work, I cannot write another book right now. So what I'm giving up, not for long, obviously, I'm going to give it up for this year, but I'm not writing a new book in this period. So that is really weird to me, but there's just no bandwidth. So I had to give up that. I don't do much on social media either, but giving that up has been difficult. But also what I think is that I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. Like 2005 was when I really got into writing professionally. And so I need the break. I feel like and also I turned 50 this year, and I just felt like, and I have a backlist of 50 books, almost 50 books. So I'm marketing my backlist, I'm doing all this, but I know that this academic rigor is going to help my Gothic Cathedral book when I get back to it. I know the ideas I'm getting will help my fiction. So it's sort of giving up something for a time in order to just change things a bit. So is it different to yours, really?
Yeah, I think it is different, because to me, you're almost like somebody on, a sabbatical.
Yeah, it's a sabbatical.
Yeah. And it's not even a full sabbatical. You've still got your toe in the water very much. You're doing things that, your idea.
I'm still podcasting.
Your idea of on the down low is hilarious. It's more than most people manage to do in a good week. So there is that. But yeah, I think it's quite different. For me, it was very much a sort of a stepping up after I had been forced to sort of step away a little bit more than I wanted to for personal reasons last year and the beginning of this year. And then I had a rest. But I was very much ready then to kind of step up and, what's the next 5 years look like? I'm at that point of the 5-year plan, and wanting to get more time and more attention on my novels, in particular, and all of that. So I think it's quite different, but I think it's interesting that the basic things remain the same, and that there is a bit of a struggle when you're trying to move from what you used to do to what you want to do. There's always that gap that you have to kind of cross, and it always feels a little bit scary. And am I making a mistake? And do I really want to? And
oh yeah.
the comfort zone.
I think one of the weirdest things with academic writing, if you're not publishing, which obviously I'm not, it's like a taught master. So the essay, which I'm spending so much time on, and some of these essays will be as much time as I've spent on a book,
Sure.
there is an audience of one, which is the professor. And after years of writing for publication, and also with the podcast and with this podcast, all of this stuff goes out into the world and multiple people will consume it and it becomes more of a conversation. And this is so weird to me that these essays I'm writing, which, as I said, I may turn into other things later, but there won't be anyone else reading it. And I found this very strange. Now, I know you've done, also, I'm having to change my voice. I have had to adopt an academic voice.
I was just going to ask you about that, actually. The difference in the writing itself is quite notable.
It's very, well, because one of the biggest things, certainly in fiction and poetry, is we're really trying to sort of write evocatively and bring all kinds of sensory detail in and all of this stuff, which they just don't want in an academic thing. So I'm finding it quite difficult, but also interesting. So I kind of am adopting a character, and the character is somebody who writes in an academic voice.
Academic Joe, the disinterested, rigorous observer, balancing things right and left. Yeah.
Yes. And I think the other thing, I'm really enjoying the rigor of the research and the attribution. So I am using some AI tools to help me find things to read. But then, of course, I'm taking that journal article and going to the university search facility, finding the article, downloading the article, reading the article, attributing it in the right way and all this. And so I'm really enjoying that. And I think it's so important in the era of AI to check attribution because, of course, the models make stuff up. Hallucination, another word for they are creative and they make up stuff. And so you really do have to do this. And I like the rules around it in the university. So yeah, I'm finding it just a very interesting thing. But I'm also struggling to read any more than I do because I'm reading hours every day and doing all this. So I'm definitely finding it a challenge to sort of read as much fiction, for example, because I don't want to read anymore. But you've done academic stuff. Is it something that you miss or any sort of thoughts on why it's important in a publishing world? Because obviously academic publishing is such a different beast.
Completely different. So, and it's interesting actually at the moment the way self-publishing is connecting with it. So one of the things, I actually had 3 events over the last while. Author Nation was just, and 4 if you count SelfPubCon, the online event, but 3 physical events. So before I went to Author Nation, I went to an academic conference in Dublin about W.B. Yeats, and it was interesting being back in the academic world, and I actually decided that is my last academic conference. Yeah, it was interesting. I've always enjoyed them. And the 8th Summer School in Sligo, I've gone regularly, but I taught at UCD for a good few years. And that's where the Go Creative series was born, actually. I taught creativity and culture. And my own thesis was literary studies, a historical piece. So yeah, I came sort of from that background into publishing myself. And I think probably with hindsight looking back, and I don't think this will happen to you because you've been so free beforehand, but I carried a lot from that academic background, that rigor, that idea of, something being good enough and, this is the way to do it. This is very much not the way to do it. And even though I worked in feminist studies, which was breaking down a lot of that and was multidisciplinary, like I'm sure yours is as well, which makes total sense because, knowledge can't be boxed really. It was multidisciplinary. It also introduced the idea of the personal as being every bit as valid, and the idea that there could be a disinterested voice, which very much was the drive in academia before these kinds of studies. The idea that you could be in some way objective was completely blown out of the water by feminist studies, queer studies, gender studies generally. So I enjoyed all of that. Nonetheless, I still feel that I carried a lot of weight around for a long time, and I think I kind of threw it off at the end of this conference, I thought, no, these are not my people, really. They're really interesting, fascinating, love their minds, really interesting to watch how they think and engage with each other. But actually, no. So yeah, that was kind of an
Yeah,
interesting
and I
experience.
think that's interesting. On finding your people, what I do love about this course is that I'm with a whole load of people who do not flinch at death. And, I've often, people don't want to talk about it, and completely fine for some people, but I'm on the course as like an embalmer and a priest who does the burials and things like that. So people want to talk about a topic that I have brought into my writing for many, many years, and yet many people, don't want to talk about it. I mean, even in self-publishing, right, the dominant discussion is romance and love and sort of happy, joy. And I'm like, yeah, and over in the corner, all the dark thriller
All the
writers and
darkies.
crime
Yeah.
writers and horror writers and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, you used the word free there, and this is another thing I'm finding difficult, which is in writing the essay, normally when I've got a lot of opinions and I'm not used to having to back up my opinion with someone else's opinion. And that seems to be, with academia, you're like, you can have your opinion, but then you have to back it up with a whole load of other people's published opinions.
Exactly, because especially if you haven't, yeah, not even especially, yes, exactly. You have
And
to
that's
refer to
really odd.
everything ever written on this topic. And I think that's another thing that has affected me hugely was around research, because once you've done a master's thesis or beyond, you're really expected to have read everything about your little tiny niche, and know everybody who's written in it and all of that. And I think I carry that into research for my novels, because I couldn't rest until I knew absolutely everything. Whereas now I eventually over the time came to realizing, no, don't just get the bit you need and drop the rest. I would get completely lost. I mean, I enjoy it hugely, the research. It's easier than the writing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, what I think I already feel is, and I'm going to have Melissa Addy on my podcast next year, because Melissa does a lot of academic writing still and publishing things. And so is the kind of feeling that in the self-publishing world, we need more rigor, but not to the nth degree. So I think there's definitely stuff I will bring in, but I won't take it as far as a lot of this stuff is. But I do think it, especially as I said, in this era of AI, I would like to see more rigor in the self-publishing community around attribution, especially in nonfiction. But also, I mean, I've always done an author's note and always included a bibliography in my fiction as well. But I think that would actually be good practice as part of the community. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. Absolutely with you 100% on the attribution thing and the critical thinking. Critical thinking skills are a little bit missing sometimes in our community.
Yeah.
The emotion and the drama can take over sometimes. And, what we were talking about at the beginning of the show about, assessing services, even people can just float into things, or signing agreements that they haven't read, and all of that kind of thing. So I think if you're academically trained, a lot of stuff comes with that is very useful, not just in your writing and your thinking, also in your business in a strange kind of roundabout way.
And then I just sort of my final point on this in terms of the business, and I want to just say to people, so I am putting aside the writing of new material, but I have a big backlist, and this is the reality of being an author with a backlist. And it's true in traditional publishing too. Most people make most money from their backlist. So if you don't have a new book in a year or 6 months or whatever, then you can still market the backlist. And I have ads running. I actually have my first BookBub deal tomorrow as we record this that I've had in years. I have email marketing running. I'm continuing the podcast, although the Creative Pen podcast, I am taking a break on my other podcast, Books and Travel, because I don't have time for that too. I'm continuing with my Patreon. So it's almost like I'm like most authors now. So most authors have a day job, and my day job is now doing this master's degree whilst I also on the side do keep the business running, keep the wheels going on the book marketing. So I think that's important, isn't it too? Like we do have more freedom. Once you have a backlist, there are ways to repackage that, to remarket that, and to just keep things turning.
Yeah, everybody talks about that. We had one of the things that we didn't mention was the Ally Indie Author Income Survey, which we released at Author Nation, and we'll be doing a sort of an online release now shortly. But one of the things that came out again, and it's no surprise to anybody, and I think it turns up in every author income survey, that the more books you have, the higher your income. Just as a general correlation, there are outliers, as there always are, but just generally speaking. And I found myself saying a lot to people at Author Nation, young, not young in the sense of young businesses rather than young people, but people who were just starting out, beginner publishers they were in that hard place of finish the first book and halfway through the second one. I think that's the hardest moment
sure.
of all. And, just if you can get to number 3, I think that's a real change in your author business. And then if you can get 5 books working for you, then a bit more freedom comes back to you then at that point. It's just really hard when you're in the early stages of the content creation, and the early stages of the publishing business side as well is the hardest moment.
For sure. Right. Well, we're almost out of time. Is there anything else you wanted to mention? I guess we're heading into the holiday season and people are thinking about next year, and anything else you want to talk about?
Well, events again, I suppose we're looking forward now to the London Book Fair. That will be our next big physical outing for Ally. And last year we were really pretty disappointed with the indie author offering. And, the year before, I think we said the same. So it was time for us to do a little something about that. So this is just a sneak peek that we will be doing some form of SelfPubCon live at the London Book Fair in March. And I'll have more about that on the Ally podcast over the next weeks and months. But it'll be something, it's not going to be a big major conference like Author Nation, nothing like that. More like a day of mentoring where we bring our advisors and our entrepreneur members together with people who are starting out in a structured kind of way, sort of to facilitate some structured mentoring around specific problems, and then with a few talks and a bit of social and stuff thrown in. So more on that and on.
Yes, so we will be doing another one of those after that. And it is kind of crazy to think we're almost in 2026.
I know. And we're already, talking about the next one being in spring. 3 months will have passed of 2026.
Will pass so quickly. But yeah, I mean, I think as ever, as we often say, some things stay the same and many things change. But we are still creating and still writing and still here. I think that's what I felt at Author Nation too. It was, look, some of us are still here. And I remember when I started out, I would look at people like Kevin J. Anderson, for example, and be like, who are the people who are still here after decades? What is it that they do that enables them to keep going? In fact, Becca Syme had a great session on sustainable creativity in author business. Like, there are practices to put in place that mean you can keep doing this for the long term. And I think what I'm doing and what you're doing, which is giving up some things, taking a bit of a break, doing things differently, that's all part of it. We're not stopping. We're just doing things a bit differently. And who knows where we'll be by this time next year.
Exactly.
Right. So that's us for today. So happy writing.
Happy publishing. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Self-Publishing with Ally, the podcast that brings you all the advice, news, and inspiration an indie author needs today. Our creative self-publishing stream is brought to you by Orna Ross's Go Creative program, helping authors harness the power of creative flow in writing and publishing. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our association and become a self-publishing ally. You could do that at allianceindependentauthors.org.